We don't know what the carrying capacity of the Earth is. People will say today that, oh, it's because of overpopulation. You have, one child dying every 5 seconds, which is complete nonsense. Even these global institutions like the World Health Organization will admit that there's easily enough food to feed everybody. There's easily enough technology to create desalination plants to deal with the water shortages and scarcity in the third world. So I'm of the contention when I look at what we're doing and how inefficient it is and what we could do if we maximize efficiency, I think the current population could be multiplied many times over, frankly. But that doesn't change the problem of a public that doesn't think about its relationship to the planet, which hasn't been the case. Through religious indoctrination, be fruitful and multiply, we've had this rhetoric throughout time, dominant value systems of creating a family and such with no real regard for the environment that they're bringing them into, understanding that each child needs the necessities of life, so they have to have the resources of the planet. So what needs to happen, first of all, totalitarianism doesn't work. Imposing rules on people simply doesn't work in the long run. So I would never advocate, because it doesn't work, any type of oppressive policy for some kind of population control or one-child policy. I'm against all of that. What I would say, though, is that if the public doesn't begin to understand its relationship, there will obviously be natural problems which hopefully will resolve themselves by the consequence of what actually occurs. So I've jumped around a little bit. Let me just say that in a resource-based economy, the educational system would be designed from the very early ages. Instead of teaching people about Goldilocks and all of the play school, kindergarten, preschool stuff, and all these the kind of mind-numbing things they do to children, which children learn extremely fast. And of course, the young impressions are the most permanent for most of the minds of most people. Excuse me. You would teach them about their relationship with the planet. You would teach them how to grow food. That's the first thing you do with kids that are old enough to understand. You teach them what actually creates their life. You teach them about social relations. You teach them about how to live in a society and what it means and what the relationship is to the planet. So when they grow up, they might say to themselves, well, I think I might have a child now. Is the Earth prepared? Is my region prepared? Am I able to support this child? What is the current state of the planet? Is there reason to suspect that maybe the carrying capacity of the Earth can't handle any more people in the distant future? That's the type of rationale that will occur. And that's all you can hope for. If it comes down to it that the population just irrationally starts to continue to multiply itself, well, that's its own decision for demise. There's nothing anyone can do about that. You know what I mean?
But surely the depletion of the fish stocks and deforestation, that gives you an idea of not just consumerism, but growing populations' impact on resources. You may wish to address this, or even say what you just said in the film, so that skeptics can at least understand the point of view of the Zeitgeist movement on that matter.
Well, I think I've more or less explained the fundamental point of view, and the resource consumption of human beings has to be related to the carrying capacity of the Earth when we finally figure out what that is. And people need to adapt accordingly, just like you adapt to any other form of natural law. It's not out of question. I really believe that the multiplication issue, this constant reproduction and expansion, is a result of early religious indoctrination. It's the Catholic Church and dominance of Europe. Uniquely the people that procreate the most tend to be the most least educated, tend also to be the most poverty-stricken, which is so bizarre when you think about it. It goes to show that there's something going on in their sense of self that is it's distorted. It's not processing correctly what the relationship to the environment is. If I was poor, living in a very destitute scenario, why would I have 5 kids? But yet this happens all the time. So it's an educational imperative, is my point, and that's all you can really hope for. Again, is that the people will come to understand. Ants, for example, I saw a beautiful documentary on ants, and ants are incredible. They will go in their huge formations and they will consume a tree, but they leave just enough. They leave just enough to make sure they never damage it. There's studies that's done in this, and they move around, and they have some type of consciousness that they never deplete anything. They never deplete anything. They know what they're doing on some base level. And I think somewhere in our human physiology is that intuitive recognition that we live on a planet that has to be respected on all levels, but it's been completely robbed out of us. We've been completely decoupled because in the current economic model, the current global economic model, you have to keep reproducing. If you don't keep reproducing, no more money will be created. The supply, the consumption patterns will drop. I mean that very literally. If people stopped procreating right now, the economy would fail. That's how sick this society is. And that's why it's going to be so self-destructive in the long run from multiple angles, because it's not based on anything sustainable. So the more the population grows, it's going to hit a peak, and the peak is not going to be real. It's going to be because the system can't supply anything else. It's not going to work anymore. And the saddest thing that I don't want to see, hopefully, I don't want to see ever, and sadly I think it might happen anyway, but it probably won't happen in my lifetime, is a depopulation because of a lack of resources. It's not going to be the New World Order. Just have to throw that out there, because I'm so sick of the New World Order shit, but that's an aside. It's going to be because the system can't support the people naturally based on the way it's organized. That's the fear. And that's the worst aspect of this entire thing. It's bad enough that we have the death and starvation on a daily basis already. We already have mass starvation with 1 billion people, and yet everyone sort of looks a blind eye to it, like, oh, that's just the way it is. Da, 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 da. Wait till it hits 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion. That's going to be really grotesque. Really grotesque, and hopefully, if anything that will change people's minds about what's happening, something like that will, as sad as that is. Again, I don't want any of that to happen, but that's the pace, that's the trend that's emerging right now with this total systemic collapse. The population bubble will pop too if this isn't corrected soon enough.
It's a bit tricky, my question. I know, I sort of think I understand your views on secret societies and conspiracy theories and the Illuminati and New World Order and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to go a little bit above it and think, sort of try to place the monarchy, the British monarchy. Unfortunately, I've noticed in my own, if I can say, ignorant research, that most people in London or in Britain believe the British monarchy to be only symbolic. I completely go against that. So I was hoping you could enlighten me on where will the British monarchy fit and the Freemasons in the whole picture. How are we going to get them involved?
Okay, so basically I'll state the question. You're asking if I believe where the British monarchy fits within the...
Yes, how are we going to get the Queen to go, come on, you know.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I'm not really up to speed with such issues, to be perfectly honest with you. Especially, I really know nothing about the British monarchy and any kind of general...
There's some guys appear on the notes and they're quite rich.
Sure.
They got palace just down the road from me.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's kind of a question, because I don't see them backing down, especially when we have an army, like the British army, swearing allegiance to her.
Well,
to the people.
The allegiance of any army can be shifted. We've seen that historically, regardless of the context. You know, that I believe that happened in Egypt. That even happened in Venezuela, oddly, in a false coup that occurred about a decade ago. But I don't know how to answer your question, unfortunately. But thank you.
We'll be investigating.
Okay, if you want to clarify that, maybe you can catch me outside.
Right.
This man here, please, Jenny. He's been waiting.
And let's try to keep the questions. You know, I know everyone likes to communicate. It's just people want. I know it's a short period of time. That's also.
Hi, Peter. I'm a PhD student at Plymouth, southwest England, currently researching epigenetic robotics. My background's in computer science and evolutionary and adaptive systems. Quick question: are you aware of the existence of any website or internet accessible system that allows individuals around the world to log the presence of resources and their location and current state? So I'm talking about a bottom-up constructed database that's globally accessible and open to everyone.
We've been trying to create that for a while. We called it From Earth to Venus.
From Earth to Venus. Right.
It was a gesture that I still have programmers, playing around with, which is basically an online Wikipedia type of arrangement where you have to fact check it, obviously, and it's about documenting and essentially making different layers. There was some Google API programs that were able to do this, where you first of all, you denote where everything is, then you denote, logic, construct a logic of certain infrastructure depending on what the goal is in whatever region, whether it's irrigation. You look at where the locations of the best geothermal power plants are, where the best wind farms are. You do exactly what you just described. So we have that program that we've been trying to get going.
I'm talking more about a kind of real-time global map of resources that resources including people, books, cars, just if everyone could, I'd quite like to start sharing resources with people now. And what I'm imagining is a community of people all around the world who want to share their resources, their possessions, so they upload where they are, what they have to this system. And then you've got what I see as the beginning of a resource-based economy, and we could do this now, right?
That is happening now, isn't it?
Do you see what I mean? Yeah.
That is happening now.
That could provide your parallel structure.
Yeah, no, I completely. I mean, the Facebook kind of arrangement that does this, an intuitive, well, a crude form of way of describing as far as general human interaction and what they're doing. So I know, I think that, I mean, the program is probably already in existence in a loose form for what you're describing. But as in your field, you should work to create.
What's your next job?
I shall look into it.
Good.
Okay, middle again.
Jacques was mentioning in the video that you can change the surface of the Earth in about 10 years. Is that the period you think, if looking forward we say that we have the amount of people needed in the movement, is that the amount of time you would need to get to the ideal city? And could you expand a bit on, well, how long will the transition take? And also on the social and economical mechanisms that we will expect to have during the transition.
Well, the 10-year thing is from my understanding in my own talks, because that was actually a dated video, was simply about what it would take when everyone's in agreement. Now that's a, beyond that, I think it would take a lot longer to, I mean, the transition really is a cultural transition. It's the transition of getting people to understand it and realize that it's in their best interest and it's best for everyone and it will resolve tremendous numbers of problems. I really couldn't tell you the time frame of transition. It's impossible. It's a common question. I completely understand it. It's real. The more things unfold, the more we'll know. Right now, it's a big blob of instability and dormant kind of things that you can see a lot of things that are on the horizon that could sprout up and very, very quickly and very dramatically, but we don't know yet. Until something rather colossal happens, I can't give any frame of reference. I really don't know. All I know is that nothing's going to change until people begin to push the direction in the most critical mass that we can create. So that's just what I keep, explaining to people.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay. I wish I could give you more information. I'm not a prophet.
Go on the right again, anyone on the right? Up at the back there.
Hi, you describe that we're defined by environment in the film. To me, that's just as dangerous as saying we're defined by our genetics.
It doesn't say we're defined by our environment. It says there's an interaction of environment and genetics, and the environment is triggering genetic responses. The environment. What is evolution? Evolution is the process of establishing traits. Well, actually, be more specific. Genes are changing along with the physiology of the organism. The organism's survival is contingent on what? The environment. The environment dictates everything at the end of the day. Our genes are products, in fact, of the environment through long periods of evolution. That's essentially the point that's being made. It's not a denial of genetics.
But you forget about the environment of our own intuition. It doesn't go into it on the video. It's, we have our own intuition. And we might have a bad environment, but we can change things like everyone has here. We've come here because of our intuition. That's could be a transition stage to develop the intuition, our own being.
Okay, I don't know what intuition is. It's one of those terms that is undefined in my mind. I can't find a physical referent for the term intuition. I've heard a lot, but I think it's really a romantic notion. It's about, there's so many things happening in our brains. There are so many reactions, muscular, that are happening. Just like someone could throw a ball at me and I won't think about it and I'll grab something. I'll stick my arm out and catch it. Our brains are doing things constantly that we have no concept of and are perceiving things constantly. So a certain collage of environmental factors can trigger something and we have a reaction that's intelligent and we think to ourselves, ooh, I knew that happened, but we don't know why. And we think, oh, it might be in our intuition, as though there's some type of sub-level. But it's really just the subconscious comprehending things that our rational mind is unable to do and explain. That's the way I would define intuition personally.
I feel like it's more of a need to want to be in balance and want to be happy, you know, because the world is not in balance. That's why we're all here, because we don't feel comfortable with it, you know. So there's an element in us that wants to change, that defines our character as well as the environment. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. No, I agree with that. And I don't know, but I just wouldn't say that's intuition. That's all. I would say that's the environment's effect on you, where you know something's wrong. You know, people say to me, oh, I just know something's wrong, and they don't know why. And that's why I go back to the example I just made, that there's so many interactions occurring around us that we can't possibly perceive. And responses that we do that we don't even think about. We play tricks on ourselves. The mind is extremely fallible in many ways when it comes to the influences that are coming in and out of it and the biases of the individual. So I don't want to go on a long-winded tangent on that, but I believe that when people say to me, you know, I just feel that something's wrong, it's not that it's a feeling per se. It's that it's a perception that they don't understand why. It's a feeling that's there because it's generated as a feeling, but it's an intellectual perception. Something's happened, but it's happened in a way that they don't mentally comprehend it. And that happens all day long with all of us. You know, a lot of books I've read on how mind plays tricks on you and the way we comprehend things. It's a fascinating subject. So, you know, but I agree. I mean, yeah, something's definitely wrong. And I think many people are beginning to realize that, whether they're conscious of it or not, you know.
Okay, just 2 quick comments on the cost of a city. I think Portugal is aiming to do a TVP-like city with a central nervous system by 2015, and the estimated cost is $15 billion. Mm-hmm. And another comment on the population argument, check gapminder.org with a statistical analysis from Hans Rosling. Some has good data on that, and how it gradually stabilizes to about 9 million by 2050. 9 billion, sorry. I'm confusing million with billions. Okay, my question now.
Yes, please.
It's regarding transition. I know the focus of the movement is getting the information out there and essentially making the value shift in the culture, but I think when the shit hits the fan, to be honest, people may need something more tangible. So my question is, do you think that we could each chapter as a parallel action get all the sustainability organizations together, like Free Economy, CollapseNet, or carpooling, and make a global or chapter level network of trying to get the fundamentals, so we have some stable network when the big collapse occurs. So,
so bringing together of other organizations as more support, you mean?
Yeah, in parallel with getting the information out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, as long as the other organizations really understand the direction and are willing to support it. If there's dichotomy, people ask me all the time, well, why doesn't Greenpeace work with you, or why doesn't any other of the mainstream, so to speak, mainstream activist communities? Because they don't understand the direction. They're not identified with it. I've had numerous communications with lots of established institutions. And what can I do with an organization? I mean, a lot of activist organizations see the traffic, and they just want to put one of their banner ads up. They're not really into partnership. They just want to expose themselves. So as long as they're in line, but the Zeitgeist movement is this network in and of itself. And what I say to people in other organizations, I say, well, we'll continue to work with that organization, but why don't you come in and help support this as well as a secondary? And I think that's the best way to think about it. Rather than get confused, overlap with different intents, which I think can be very detrimental, I'd rather keep it homogeneous. And that's what I say to everyone. They say, well, why don't you partner with this, this, and this? And I say, why don't you maintain that and come to us as well? That's a better way to look at it, as opposed to confusing people. And we end up with 20 partner organizations, and they all have their own little angles of what they're doing. If any organization out there that's explicitly interested in a resource-based economy that isn't of an ego disposition, because we've had this happen where these sort of usurpers come in, and they come in a very, very, very non-professional, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very arrogant disposition where they want to usurp. They think they'll just do it better. They're not even trying to work with us. They want to just override it because they know better. I have an obvious disrespect for that, because what can you do with that when you have an internal group at odds? So I disregard that as well. If they're not willing to simply accept what we set up, that's already global now, it's already in motion, I I have no real comment on that. I say if you really support it, you'll do your work with us and with whatever organization you're doing simultaneously. So that's the way I look at it.
Okay, I was just referring to transition mostly and not like the ultimate goal, which is the resource-based economy. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is the transition we're in right now. So that, I mean, we're in the transition, so everything that we're doing now is equally as important as it will be 10 years down the road.
Okay, there's a guy there. This guy in the middle here, sitting next to my daughter, who I'm trying hard to indoctrinate.
Hi, Peter. I'm here representing the Miami, Florida chapter, and we really don't have any problems getting the information out, finding people who agree. Our problems come after that. Like, what do we do after that? Most people, their exposure to the scientific method was high school chemistry. You know, how can we get them to begin to think in that technician's mindset and then apply that to their daily lives and to how they view society? Like, what projects can we take on as a chapter to begin educating our community?
That's a great question. I think there's some wonderful texts on the Venus Project's reading list that if you break them into chapters, obviously Jock's book, and then Tyranny of Words is a great thought exercise book. It's I consider it quite scientific in its abstraction. There's also, there's a lot of big interest now in science and sanity, I've found, the book Science and Sanity. A lot of books I can't really think of right now, but they force into the inferential state of mind, if you will, where it gets people to look at causal reality, just like I outlined, you know, in part 3, where it's describing from the ground up why the reasoning of this society is what it is. So I guess you just simply have to kind of, if someone's new, try to get them into that mindset for the reasoning, understanding the reasoning, and that's essentially what the scientific method of thought is, as long as the data set, of course, is correct. So you have to be creative with it and also think about who you're dealing with. If someone's interest is already in a field of science, then push them towards something that's related to the field that they're in, so they have an identification with it. If someone is in an artistic context, then you would go in a very different way. You wouldn't give them, you know, I can't think of an example, right? You wouldn't give them something so technically specific that it would be too much for them, you know? So I recommend taking the individual into account and trying to get active information going. What everyone should be doing at all times is learning. And I think people forget that. Even I don't know everything. I haven't read everything on the Venus Project's reading list, even though I certainly want to. I haven't read everything that I've had in this gigantic list that's subsourced, but it's all there and I will eventually do it. The process of education is almost the most critical part in getting people to understand just in as much as possible about what's relevant, as much as possible in a relevant context, specifically to the resource-based economy. So, excuse me, by the way, I'm very jet lagged, so that's a big question, and I would have to say that using the book sources as a starting point and pushing those books on those that have nothing to do, as you stated, or want something to do, and get your feedback on them and have groups that talk and discuss those ideas, and also invent and create. That's another thing I definitely recommend, especially for those that are technically minded, to get them to think about how they would redesign North America. What parameters would they use and why? What would be the self-evident generation? Is it just a whim of theirs? Are they actually researching it? You see what I mean? There's all sorts of thought exercises that go into this, which is why, as I mentioned, From Earth to Venus is so important, and I'm really looking forward to getting that going. It's been a difficult programming complication as of now, to get people together and say, oh, wow, this is great. Think about how creative and fun that would be to get people that are fluent in, you know, structural design, to start from the macrocosm and then hone in region by region about how you would design the most efficient society. So I recommend all of that. Beyond that, it's all a matter of awareness and spreading awareness for each one. So the scientific method, train of thought, isn't something that you can just give somebody, because inferential assessment has to be as objective as possible. Human beings intrinsically, especially in this culture, are not objective. So they have to overcome their victimization of culture, you know, which we've talked about at length as well. So I hope that kind of helps.
Hello, Peter. My name is Mihai.
Hi.
I'm from Romania. I live in the UK. Zeitgeist Movement Romania says hello, even if I don't really activate with them.
Excellent.
Since I live here. Now, my question is related a bit to a documentary I saw. I think the name was Ethos. It's a bit related to the Zeitgeist movement, although I'm not entirely aware of what the connection is, but there's a lot of ideas that we're taking on and put into that documentary. I felt that it was a bit diluted to a certain extent, but the point is they've used Woody Harrelson as a presenter for this documentary. And, you know, coming from that, I mean, I work in the car design business, which is more or less like advertising publicity, and I'm, you know, trained, conditioned to think a bit in this way. And I'm looking at all these movie stars, and in the case of Woody Harrelson that was promoting that documentary, and I'm thinking, shouldn't our communications team maybe concentrate their efforts into getting a lot of these famous people in and kind of getting them to spread our message, because they, you know, their impact is, you know, 1,000 times more than what my impact would be into, you know, just kind of getting the people to understand what this is all about. As I'm giving the example of Tom Cruise, for example, who is a famous Scientologist, although I don't even know what Scientology is all about. It's probably loads of...
Excuse me, what's your question?
Yeah, the question is, do you think this is a, you know, a healthy direction that the movement should pursue right now into trying to getting these, you know, these famous people like singers or whatever, movie stars?
No, absolutely. There's a thing, there's a project called the Zeitgeist Media Festival, which is a derivative of our Zeitgeist Media Project, which is currently a website where people upload various media they've created that support the movement. It's really an artistic type of outlet. And with the festival, I'm going to do my best when I try this, hopefully late summer, to get as many famous people, or at least well-known people, people that have an audience, to come and perform at this. Hopefully, hopefully volunteer. But there's a few people that really have shown an interest to do so. I completely agree that probably over politicians, over philosophers, people pay more attention to media personalities than anything else. I mean, our values, I think, in the Western world is really groomed by the movies that people watch and the TV shows that they watch, from my experience. Probably more so than anything else, in fact. It's almost quite scary when you see the influence that they have. So yes, it's critically important. I didn't see the Ethos documentary. They contacted me and wanted to use chunks of my movie that's in it, and I had no idea when I saw it, because someone sent it to me. I'm like, well, how do they use this? And I got a little irritated because I didn't know memory of it. But nevertheless, Woody Harrelson being in it really surprised me. So that's amazing that they are able to do that, you know. So I completely agree. And anyone that has connections to any media personalities, I know that there was a campaign to contact lots of media personalities that were socially active a number of months back on the global website. So, yeah, hopefully, I think if we get maybe 2 or 3, then the breach will be made, and others will step forward and be able to not feel uncomfortable by supporting this direction. Yeah, I think it'd be wonderful. I think it's also right around the corner, frankly. I know underneath the surface there are a lot of celebrities, people have mentioned to me, that do support this direction, but they don't come out. They're not willing to talk about it, because it's their identity that's at stake. So it has to be comfortable for them.
Thank you. Hi, Peter. I've just got 2 questions. My first one relates to hydrocarbon technology, our addiction to it, and how do we wean ourselves off this technology and the geopolitics associated to it. How do you see us getting from where we are heavily addicted to the Venus Project, where we are not addicted? I know you've had a lot of questions about how do we get from here to there, but my question is mainly focused on energy. My second question is, have you considered a move into politics to take the establishment on sort of head on and sort of take the Zeitgeist movement forward to like a voting public where people could even like vote for it?
Well, the second question, politics is really something that at the end of the day would be phased out as we know it in the future. It's not a legitimate institution. It's not based on anything but people promoting values, the public identifying with those values arbitrarily, no information, no scientific understanding, no education, no scientific knowledge of city planning, of any organization. When Sarah Palin becomes President of the United States, which would not surprise me in a second, it'll be a perfect testimony to what politics actually represents. It's this mind-numbing system of complacency where people feel satisfied when they hit that voting button, so they don't have to ever think about anything anymore. It's a self-generating oppression system, if you will. Completely.
I guess what I'm saying is
it's
almost like a step progress.
Yep. No, I understand what you're saying, and people have brought this up to me before, using the political system as some type of soapbox, if you will. And I've had people say, oh yeah, I'll run for whatever and do it just for the publicity of it, which I completely support. I think you have to have a lot of money to do any type of political office run. So if someone has that type of resource, I would certainly say, I wouldn't do it. But I think somebody else, if they want to do in that platform, especially if someone who's been in politics for a little while that sees the light, but they're already in it, and then they move and do it, because what they're doing is they're moving into a system that they actually want to eradicate, which is a kind of a unique notion in and of itself. As far as the first question in the energy transition, we could do tremendous energy shifts right now if there was any interest to do so. Unfortunately, the investment that's required is so colossal and the return is so distant. The monetary system is driven by short-term gain. And if you can't get short-term gain, you get very little motivation, regardless of the lack of sustainability and the problems on the horizon. They should have been doing, even for the hype on global warming and climate destabilization, regardless of what you believe, it's obvious that oil is a problem in what we're doing. So even if peak oil wasn't real, there's still a very dire need to stop burning all of this stuff. They could have done this a long time ago, so there's a reason they're not, and it's the monetary system that's the problem. So how do you usurp the monetary system in that regard? Frankly, it would take a huge investor right now to initiate that, which you'd think would be there as well, just for a multi-billionaire that's willing to step forward and initiate these processes, but that doesn't happen either. So the answer to your question is that it's really hindered by the system. I have no idea, except the fact that you have to bypass the system. As far as I'm concerned, you're going to, as I mentioned in the film, you have to bypass the system if you expect to see a revision, a complete revolution, if you will, of energy infrastructure and energy sources on this planet, because there's no way in hell any government, any country's going to be able to afford it, especially now with the debt collapse that's spreading like a virus.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the biggest threat to us at the moment is energy and our consumption, and peak oil is the biggest threat. I think that if you could raise awareness for that, I think the first step, you could actually have people vote for a government that would freely support a not-for-profit sort of development of alternative energy. So you could have 700 billion, $1 trillion, or whatever it was, investment in or people where they're working not-for-profit to find alternative solutions to hydrocarbon technology, etc.
You'd hope.
Yeah.
You would certainly hope, yeah.
People like yourself, for example, were to, from government or whatever, where that was the key interest to bring ourselves off this technology, where people could go and research in an environment, in a not-for-profit environment that's supported by the state, that could perhaps win ourselves off such a thing, and then develop this technology in an environment which is not-for-profit.
I wish it was easy to do as it is for you to say. You got to bypass the ultimate element of this system that supports it, and that's the need for monetary acquisition at all costs and the maximization of that. And unfortunately, and that's why it's brought up in the film in the way it is, everything that this system is about is against what you talk about, even with nonprofit institutions, even with governments. Look at all the attempts that's been made to try and get governments for decades now to change its energy policies, and what good has it come? I mean, even with the Green Party, you'd think that the public would be all about a Green Party in some country, but they can't see it. They have far too much experience with their little dyad of liberals and Democrats and the arbitrariness, and they're not comfortable even moving into something new, unfortunately. So I throw my hands in the air and say, I wish what you state would easily come to fruition. Obviously, your logic is sound, so I agree with that. But will it happen? Something's going to happen. That's for sure.
Okay, we've got to wrap it up.
I do know that something's going to happen.
Peter Joseph.